Overwatch's competitive game mode is dying. The ranked game mode in this game is quite frankly disappointing, lacks any structure, and the quality of communication from Blizzard is disappointing. There's an ever-evolving toxicity around this game, and the competitive ladder really does not incentivize any strong team play at all. Today we're going to talk about why Overwatch's competitive ladder is killing the game, and the steps that Blizzard can take to fix it. My name is Nathan, and this is Blizzard Guides. There are quite a few reasons why, and there are little ones here and there, but I think there are really three big ones that I want to talk about today. The way I'm going to structure this video is I'm going to give you a reason, and then I'm going to explain a little bit more in depth, and the best way that Blizzard can approach this situation. So at number 3, we've got just a lack of incentive for team play. This is by far the biggest reason why. Basically, you can't really ever stack more than 2 players without getting severely punished. This hurts not only queues of players, but also the solo queue players, which I will explain in a moment. This has been my experience and the experience of many others, that when you stack, you are extremely likely to get put up with other smurfs and stronger players, because the game forces a fair game. I'm going to explain why. In Overwatch, you have 2 numbers associated with your skill. There's the skill rating, or SR, and the matchmaking rating, or MMR. The SR is the number that you see when you look at your career profile. The MMR, however, is the number that the SR system thinks you are. So if you're a smurf and let's say that your SR on that smurf account is 3000, but your actual skill rating is 4000, then the game will set your MMR across any accounts that you have somewhere around 4000 on any smurf accounts. So in a nutshell, the SR is the spot on the ladder that you have, and the MMR is where the game thinks you should be. So with that explained, let me tell you how the matchmaking system uses these 2 numbers. The matchmaking system prioritizes creating a fair game, which definitely seems correct at a first glance, and it really does. The game will attempt to make the average MMR of a team equal to the other, while also increasing the average MMR of a pre-made queue. What this means in simpler terms is that the game tries to create a match where the MMR and the SR averages of each team are equal to one another. That way, the SR shows as 3000 on both sides, and the MMR on both teams is equal. Now, the MMR might not necessarily be equal on both sides, which is where the problem begins. When you have a group of 2 or greater players, the MMR of your team increases. So if I've got a 6 stack and everybody's average MMR is equal to 3000, the game will actually treat it like a queue of solo queue players who have an average MMR of somewhere around 3200. What this means is that if the game can't find an equally sized queue with the same MMR to put you up against and the same SR, it actually tries to find other players of higher MMR to compete against your pre-made queue so that it can create a fair match. You're more likely to be put against smurfs and really good players of the same SR 2 or 3 ranks above where you are. I recently went and 4-stacked with 3 masters and a GM player, and I actually went up against a bunch of top 500 players. It's actually really crazy how harsh the matchmaker is on team queuing. Now, here's why I think that extends further than just a disincentive for pre-made queues. Whenever I end up against a 6-stack, I always end up having my team try a lot harder and coordinate more. I've really never seen a team that doesn't really try a bit harder whenever they see a 6-stack, with the exception of games where you have just a bunch of throwers on your team. I think that the more that we see 6-stacks, the more important it becomes that a team, pre-made or not, works together. I think that if Blizzard removed any restrictions on a pre-made queue of players, we would instantly see better matches because of the fact that players who are not willing to flex and play for the team will drop. I think that we need to see all sorts of fancy matchmaking adjustments go away, and that we need a strict and more solid rule set. I don't think group queues should be disincentivized, but rather they should be incentivized and encouraged, which actually brings me to my next point. At number 2, we have a really bad LFG system, or actually the lack thereof. There really is no way to find other players to play with in this team-based game. I should be able to go into the matchmaking client and find other players who are of the same SR, and find players who are going to complement my abilities. So let's say I play a lot of Winston Diva, but I don't have any healers that are going to be willing to play dive supports. Well, I can just find other dive support players in this LFG tool so that I can group up and queue with more players who are willing to complement my abilities. What this means is that if I really need somebody to queue with and I want to run dive all of the time, I'm able to find other players who want to run dive all of the time who have similar skill sets. And there are a lot of players and a lot of different SRs, so you wouldn't really necessarily have too much trouble finding other players that are more willing to either flex or play specific roles that you've been missing from your team comps. So despite the fact that it will take a bit longer to queue, I think we would see a greater quality of matches should there be an LFG system in the game. Then once you get your 6-stack ready, you queue in or warm up and you're just ready to go. This way, there's no argument of, well, I have a Torb one trick in my game, GG. Furthermore, if you have some really good games, you'll be able to play with that team more often, and you'll learn the game of Overwatch at a more fundamental level. This would greatly encourage team gameplay and get rid of the practice of one tricking, something that is really plaguing the game. One tricking an unfavorable hero shouldn't necessarily be bannable, but as the recent avoid his teammate function has shown, players do not want to be matched with one tricks, so a good LFG tool would really mitigate that effect. You could even have a rating system in the LFG tool where after playing with a specific person, you could actually rate them rather than having to report, block, and avoid as you do now. Whenever you get a bad player on your team, you go through this motion of reporting, blocking them, and then avoiding them as teammate. You shouldn't really have to do that with a good LFG tool. 5 stars if they were good and fun to play with, 3 if maybe they were good but toxic or vice versa, and 1 star if they were just bad and toxic in general. A system like that would really bring health to the game because despite the fact that it would take longer to get into a competitive game mode, I think that it would help the overall health of the game. There's a lot of room to improve on a system like this, and this is just a kind of pitch for it, but I think something like that is very necessary and something that we need to see very soon. And lastly, at number 1, we really just need to see a separate team queue and a separate semi-solo queue. What I mean by semi-solo queue is basically you can't just queue with anything greater than a 3 stack. So you can have a solo queue, duo queue, or trio queue, but you really can't have anything more than that. I think separating the two would really help the health of the game because in the pre-made stack, you can only ever have coordinated teams against coordinated teams. In addition to a good LFG tool and the removal of restrictions on team-based queues, I think we would really see a much healthier game. The more people that watch Overwatch League, the more people that want to play the competitive game mode, and the more people that play the current competitive game mode, the more people that are going to be leaving disappointed. That was a mouthful of a sentence, but what I mean is just more people are going to leave the game disappointed if they keep seeing the way it is. We need a team-based queue where it's easy to find other players to play with. The biggest overarching concept is that team play needs to be incentivized, so something where you can actually play with a team without having any sort of disadvantage because you're going to be playing against other teams that are of a similar skill, you're more likely to have better quality games. And I even think that removing the restriction on whether or not they are within 1000 SR or 500 SR depending on where you are on the ladder would really be healthy for the game. The reason being, despite the fact that we will see some players boosted, I would much rather have a few players boosted here and there rather than the current finger pointing that we have where we say, hey, I think this person's boosted but they might actually not be boosted, and it's kind of confusing because they only play this one hero and they have a good win rate but they're playing really poorly. It wouldn't really exist with a team-based queue because you wouldn't really have to point fingers because you're kind of friends with everybody on your team. If you don't want to play with somebody, you just don't queue with them ever again. A matchmaking system that really relies on stats rather than your actual true skill in the game really doesn't make sense, so something like a separate queue would really help out. I absolutely love this game and I really want to see it thrive, but hearing people call the game dead constantly really makes me wonder what kind of problems the game is having because people just don't call a game dead for no reason. I really do think that the competitive system is the reason for this, and I really do believe that it can be fixed. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought about this video. If you have any criticisms of my approach to the solution, I'd really love to hear what you guys have to say. And if you think you've got a better idea, let me know in the comments down below. I really genuinely want to hear what you guys have to say. This is currently a big topic in the community and it really deserves a lot of discussion, especially considering that there have been some rumors of and complete different overhauls to the competitive system coming this summer. So I'd really like to hear you guys' theory craft in the comments down below. Also, don't forget to leave a like on this video as it really helps us know that you guys are enjoying this content, and don't forget to subscribe as we have a lot of epic moments videos so that you can see the best plays from around the globe, and we've got tips and tricks videos just like this so that you can be the best player that you can be. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Have a nice day. My name is Nathan and this was Blizzard Guides.